On the eastern end of the Duke of Gloucester Street in Colonial Williamsburg, a midday outing would find me walking over historic grounds where prominent framers of the Constitution would have crossed over during the 18th century to enter inside the colonial capital of Virginia. After fire again destroyed the State House in nearby Jamestown, the original capital of the colony of Virginia, a relocation of the colony's government to Middle Plantation was decided and made permanent in 1699. Thereafter, renamed Williamsburg in honor of King William III of England. From 1705 to 1747, the first Capitol building in the young city of Williamsburg stood here. One of the country's first planned cities, Lieutenant Governor Francis Nicholson expected Williamsburg to be a new and well-ordered city worthy of being the capital of Great Britain's largest colony in America. The Capitol in Williamsburg housed both houses of the Virginia General Assembly, the oldest continuous lawmaking body in the Western Hemisphere, first established in Jamestown in 1619. With Williamsburg being the capital of the colony of Virginia, as the years went by, it found itself mired within the political turbulence and rumblings brought on by unjust British rule. Tensions and turmoil, which would eventually lead to pushback by brave advocates in support of forming an independent nation. From within the walls of the Capitol, cries of treason were shouted out by cautious Burgesses, witnessing one of their newly elected, outspoken representatives vocalize his political stance against parliamentary taxation. Patrick Henry's famous Caesar Brutus speech opposing the Stamp Act happened here inside the Capitol, a place I've yet to explore the interior of until now. My quest would take me through the Capitol's southern gate, under the piazza and into the general court, before heading up the west stair hall to get a glimpse of the council chamber and conference and committee rooms. Then descending down the east stair hall to finish off my scenic excursion inside the hall of the House of Burgesses. The original Capitol building that stood here for over 40 years was the first American structure to be referred to as a Capitol. It was destroyed by fire in 1747, with only a few brick walls, furnishings, and the building's foundation remaining after the disaster. Inside the second Capitol that was rebuilt here on the original foundations of the first is where key events of the American Revolution took place. A place where the likes of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, George Mason, Richard Henry Lee, George Wythe, Peyton Randolph, Patrick Henry, and others would craft their art of representing the people of the colony. It's also here where they would position legislation that would eventually lead to American independence. During the 5th Virginia Convention, meeting at the Capitol in Williamsburg, a resolution was passed that would instruct Virginia delegates at Philadelphia's Continental Congress to propose to that respectable body to declare the United Colonies free and independent states, absolved from all allegiance to or dependence upon the Crown or Parliament of Great Britain. The answer to their proposal was encapsulated within the Declaration of Independence. After the Revolutionary War began, the capital of Virginia moved to Richmond. The now vacated second Capitol building was used for multiple purposes throughout the years after government's departure, but over time it was neglected and the east wing was removed. The building would meet its fate, being destroyed by fire many years later in 1832. The third, present-day Capitol building found in Williamsburg, rebuilt in the early 1930s, was modeled after the first Capitol that once stood here, closely reconstructed based on historical design documentation, archaeological evidence, as well as a unique engraved copper plate print that was discovered in the Bodleian Library at the University of Oxford. Known as the Bodleian Plate, upon its discovery, it was referred to as one of the most vital records of early Williamsburg. It depicts several key landmarks found in the 18th century city, including the eastern-facing perspective of the first Capitol building. Inside the Capitol building's lower west wing resides the General Court, the highest court in the colony of Virginia. In the 18th century, where civil cases, misdemeanors, and day-to-day operations were handled inside county courthouses, significant trials, including felonies by free persons, were handled here. The bench of the General Court was presided over by the royal governor himself and the governor's council. In criminal cases, capital offenses were punishable by the death penalty. Those convicted were held in the public jail in Williamsburg before facing their final, dreadful moments at the gallows. Those convicted of lesser felony charges at the General Court might receive a special pardon and escape execution altogether. Known as the benefit of clergy, the accused would be branded by iron in the open courtroom, burning the first letter of their associated crime onto the base of the thumb. 15 of Blackbeard's pirates were once tried in the General Court here in Williamsburg. One of them being pardoned, another receiving acquittal, and 13 being sentenced to die by hanging. As we entered the West Stair Hall of the Capitol, visions of colonial-era trials that took place here were vividly being portrayed within my heightened imagination. The hollow, echoing footsteps that led our climb up to the next floor of findings billowed throughout the building's center passageway as we scaled the Capitol's wooden staircase. Stirring my eagerness to learn more of the past that took place here, inside this historic house where legislation and litigation were carried out within the colony of Virginia. Our ascension would take us to the council chamber of the upper house of the General Assembly, of where the monarchy was represented. Aside from their judicial role presiding over the General Court, the royal governor and the council would meet inside the council chamber to discuss legislation, land deals, treaties with tribal nations, and other important negotiations that serve the interest of the king. Inside the chamber is a long, oval table with 13 chairs, one for each of the 12 royally appointed representatives, and at the head of the table, one for the royal governor himself. Before the revolution, when new legislation was proposed, the joint conference room, found at the center of the Capitol's second floor, was the meeting place where appointed delegates from both the House of Burgesses and the Governor's Council would come together on occasion. Meeting inside this room, they would often debate, reshape, and formulate new resolutions or acts before being passed by both houses and then signed into law by the royal governor. As revolution was afoot in this room, 10 initial articles, roughly drafted by George Mason, would be proposed to a packed room of 40 committee members. After amendments and inclusions by committee and convention, the 16-article document known as the Virginia Declaration of Rights was adopted. A declaration detailing which rights pertain to the people of Virginia on the basis and foundation of government. The Committee of Five is thought to have been heavily influenced by it when drafting the Declaration of Independence, as well as the Bill of Rights, drafted by James Madison, also leaned on the clear emphasis the document consisted of. Next door to the main conference room of the Capitol were committee rooms where various smaller legislative bodies would meet to help draft laws and handle other matters of concern within the colony. Descending the East Stair Hall would take me to the final room of my Capitol exploration. The Hall of the House of Burgesses. The lower house of the General Assembly, unlike the royally appointed upper house, were a body of elected representatives of the colony of Virginia. During the 18th century, the House was comprised of 2 Burgesses for every county in Virginia, 1 for the College of William and Mary, and 1 for Jamestown, Norfolk, and Williamsburg. Within the walls of this room, the rise of resistance, defying British rule, took solid form on the political front. This being the location where Patrick Henry introduced resolutions known as the Virginia Resolves, which opposed the Stamp Act of 1765, a direct tax enacted by the Crown on all papers and official documents. The slogan, "No taxation without representation," was a phrase and political viewpoint clearly argued in Henry's series of resolutions. As a newly elected member of the House of Burgesses, Patrick Henry delivered a charged pre-Revolutionary War speech, which came years before his well-known "Give me liberty or give me death" speech in 1775. His vigilant speech infuriated some when, in comparison, he described King George III, finding a similar fate to that of Julius Caesar, who was assassinated, and Charles I, who was beheaded. Shouts of treason rung throughout the chamber as Henry finished his statement by saying, "George III may profit by their example," and finally, sternly asserting, "If this be treason, make the most of it." After fire destroyed the Capitol building in 1747, very little endured the aftermath of the tragedy. One fascinating relic recovered from the fire and since then preserved, seen here today within the hall of the House of Burgesses, is the Speaker's chair. The bottom of the chair is said to still show burn marks from the blaze it survived. Placed on an elevated platform and centrally positioned above the Burgesses' benches that flanked it, the ceremonial chairs royally inspired architecture displayed the prestige the role of Speaker of the House of Burgesses played during official proceedings, an idle witness to many remarkable moments in history. When a series of acts were established by Parliament in response to the Boston Tea Party, a political protest carried out by a group of patriots, the House of Burgesses adopted a resolution declaring a day of fasting, humiliation, and prayer as a show of solidarity with Boston colonists. In response to this supposed defiance, Lord Dunmore dissolved the House on May 26, 1774.
I therefore dissolve the House of Burgesses accordingly. God save the King.
The second Capitol building that stood in Williamsburg saw its last day of service as a Capitol on December 24th, 1779. Finally able to explore the interior of one of Williamsburg's most well-known landmarks from colonial times, I exited through its eastern gate with a feeling of enlightenment. Learning more about the history of the Capitol reminded me that the people, views, and processes put in place to guide us are constantly evolving. That even in the face of total devastation and incredible discourse, a strong, ongoing will to rebuild, refine, and restore that which is broken often leads to heightened perception that casts clarity on the pathway before us. Like each brick that was used to raise the Capitol 3 separate times, our recognition of the events that took place here help us build a solid understanding and respect for those who faced many bold challenges on the long, winding road leading to the American Revolution. And though the timeline from past to present day is a lengthy and oftentimes imperfect one, the Capitol in Williamsburg is a foundational component of American history, where colonial resistance first urged taking on the conquest of freedom from tyranny, where the individual rights, freedoms, and liberties we've been gifted with today were declared and installed by the brave ones here before us. A sensitive and critical part of our history that we all should constantly strive to comprehend. An ongoing awareness that will never fail to shed light upon its consistent and thorough examination.